Hey everyone, welcome back. I just got back from vacation in Australia and New Zealand. We were there for a few weeks. I'll talk about it during the podcast. But today, just wanted to break down, give a quick preview of the matchups on the main card, a UFC Fight Night, Ankalaev versus Walker 2, right? This is a rematch after the weird illegal knee that Ankalaev threw against Walker in their last fight. So we'll break down the fights. We talk about some of the UFC 300 matchups, some of the other big matchups that have been announced on different cards, and talk a little bit about my time training at Absolute MMA in Australia and getting to learn from Lachlan Giles. So if you guys enjoy the podcast, do me a favor, hit the subscribe button, give it a thumbs up, all that good shit, and otherwise enjoy. Thank you guys. Hey, what's up, everybody, and welcome back. I'm just getting back from, basically almost a 3-week vacation, right? We went home to Pennsylvania for, 2 weeks to spend time with family for Christmas and all that, but then we took off for Australia on Christmas Day. So we were in Australia for about a week. We did Sydney and Melbourne. Then we hopped over to New Zealand for the second week of the trip and spent 3 or 4 days in Wellington and then 3 or 4 days in Auckland. So, finally, I feel like just now I'm starting to beat my jet lag a little bit. But, man, pretty awesome experience. Starting off in Sydney, we did the Opera House, all that good stuff, a whole bunch of touristy stuff, right? I mean, most of our time was booked up with tours and shit just to get a feel for everything. And one of the coolest things for sure that I did there, and also kind of related to this channel a little bit more, is first off in Sydney, I hit up an open mat. First time training outside of the country, which is weird because I've traveled to different places, but thinking about it, I've only done jiu-jitsu here within the US, which is strange, right? But anyway, I hit up this little open mat at a place called Open Sparring in Sydney. It was no-gi, really nice people, kind of a small group, maybe 5 or 6 of us. That went for about an hour, but that was a cool experience, just down in this fucking a lot. And this is how the place I'll talk about in a minute was too, but you just walk in and go downstairs and it's in this basement, and man, it gets fucking hot down there. I was sweating my ass off. Sydney was hot too. So today it's literally -8 degrees out right now where I'm at near Denver, and coming back from, 80-degree weather. I do everything in Celsius, so they were always it was always in the 20s. I don't remember what the fuck it was, but nice ass weather coming back to Denver was a bit of a shock. But anyway, one of the other cool things, probably the coolest thing, was going to Melbourne and getting to go to Absolute MMA where Lachlan Giles teaches. If you guys don't know Lachlan Giles, he's famous in the jiu-jitsu community, and that's a big deal, right? It's hard to make your way up through the rankings and get a name there. He placed 3rd at ADCC. I'm not sure exactly which year, but it's just weird because I've relied on so much of his techniques and stuff. From YouTube, I have his half guard anthology, instructional that you can get on BJJ Fanatics, right? I've been watching this guy and learning from him and literally basing some of my lesson plans around the way this guy teaches and his techniques. So to get to go there, and I only took one class. It was just I just dropped in, very casual, right? He was just leading the class. Didn't get to train with him at all, which was a bit of a bummer, but he was just kind of sitting on the side, you know what I mean, after he taught. And I took a gi class with him, and they're gearing up for ADCC trials right now, so probably not doing a lot of gi work. But either way, to go in there and learn from a guy like that who, like I said, I've seen him online so many times. I've learned so many things from him through this weird medium that we have right now on the internet, right? To go and see him in real life and just it's just weird watching how they move, right? There's always something to their movement that you can't really explain what it is. You know that it's technical, but it's the same thing as watching high-level guys in the UFC fight. The way they do things is just different. It's different than the way your average hobbyist, such as myself, does it, right? And it's noticeable. So we went over knee cut details, right? And specifically, when you're knee cutting, a lot of the times the guys will frame on you. And I've been having trouble with that recently where I'm going to, cut through, but they have strong frames and I'm not getting past them and they're recovering their guard. So going over some of those details, kind of refining that was pretty cool, right? And I took a no-gi class also. I just kind of dropped in for it. But their no-gi is much, I would say, and again, they're getting ready for probably ADC trials and all that, but their no-gi game felt much stronger than the gi game, right? But also another thing to take into consideration is I spend most of my time training in the gi. I love the gi. And for their gym, like I said, getting ready for ADCC, I never know if I'm just incompetent when I go train no-gi or if they're really that much better, right? But I just felt much more at home in the gi, and it felt like they were more advanced in their no-gi game than they were their gi game, just from my fucking literal 2 days of dropping in, right? But the first class I went to was, like I said, I went to 2 classes. The second one was a gi class with Lachlan. But the first one, I can't even remember the fella's name. I have it on Instagram. But they played a lot of games, I noticed, and this is something that my professor has been trying to implement a lot, meaning you have a very strict set of rules, right? Like, for example, they would go, your goal is you start in half guard and you're trying to get chest to chest with the far side underhook, right? And head control, basically head and arm control. So you would work on ways to get there, and if the bottom person was able to change the position, basically over. Like if they could get a full guard, or if they were able to sweep you or something like that, and if you got chest to chest with them, you won the position, right? So these little positional games. And what it does is it forces you to kind of work your way into these spots. Because traditionally what you think of when you think of jiu-jitsu is, all right, I'm going in, I'm going to learn a technique, we're going to drill the technique, and then we're going to go live and we're going to practice the technique. But I find that a lot of the times what happens is when you just go out and do that, everybody just learned the same exact move. So they're all trying really hard to defend that move. And as a result of that, a lot of the times you end up shying away from what you actually worked on because people aren't having success with the move, so they bail on it and just go to other things because they're live rolling. Whereas when you play positional games, you are forcing yourself to kind of fight through that failure consistently, right? So if something doesn't go right, you're not just bailing on it and getting out of there. You're playing a positional game where you keep working and working and working until you figure out the remedy, right? So it kind of carves these pathways into your brain a little bit quicker, in my opinion, for these specific positions and what you need to achieve. I really think it's kind of, there's a gym that I forget the name of the gym. Standard Jiu-Jitsu, maybe? I feel like that's correct. I'll have to double check. But my professor mentioned it and how that's basically all they do. You just show up, they're like, hey, we're starting in headquarters. This might be your goal, or your goal is just to get to headquarters, right? There's all these different ways that you can layer it. But in theory, man, it makes a lot of sense, right? And because you can teach the technique all you want, but it becomes very hard to recall it in a live roll. But if you just give some some real work in that position, you'll find your way through those things. And it might be something the professor showed you, it might not be, but you get familiar in those spots. So really interesting way of training that I think you're going to see start popping up throughout these schools across probably the U.S. It feels like once we get a hold of things, we really innovate it for whatever reason. You know what I mean? So it was cool to see that in Australia. But like I said, I think standard jiu-jitsu is the place that gets a lot of credit for it. I'll have to double check. But anyway, pretty cool shit. And also going over there and seeing that they're implementing that type of style as well, right? At least the class I took with the first guy. The second one was a little more traditional. Lachlan showed the technique, right? Let you kind of work in the position and then training at the end. But yeah, anyway, cool experience there. Did not get to go to City Kickboxing when we went to New Zealand. We just had too many things booked, right? We did Hobbiton, all the Lord of the Rings shit. If you guys are Lord of the Rings fans, so am I. I'm a huge fan, actually. When we got back, we binged all of the extended cut ones, which we've never seen before. I've only seen the regular ones. So I'm I don't know, not a huge fan, but I'm a fan, right? So it was cool to go see all that stuff. All right, anyway, while I was gone, obviously a whole bunch of shit's going down. There's been some really big fight announcements, right? A whole bunch of, for UFC 300, let's go over some of the fight announcements there. It got Cody Garbrandt versus Davison Figueiredo, right? Garbrandt got his wish in calling out Figueiredo, and we're going to see if Garbrandt maybe gets this career resurgence after getting off to one of the more meteoric rises ever. Cater versus Sterling. That one's been out for a while. I'm just kind of going through the 300 card right now. Bo Nickel versus Cody Brundage. That's a big fight. Anytime Bo Nickel's name is on something, it's going to, you know what I mean? He's got quite a bit of star power for just getting started in his career. Charles Oliveira versus Arman Sarukian. Yuri Prohashka versus Rakic. And Zhang Wei Li versus Yan Xiaonan was announced. And that's the first ever, I believe, title fight where two Chinese, I know for sure women, but I think, no, it has to be, two Chinese born contestants will be fighting for the belt. So that's a huge historic fight there between two of the, obviously we know how good Weili Zhang is, but Yan Xiaonan's been working her way up through the rankings, and we're going to get to see if she's on that like elite level in this fight. So that's starting to shape out. A fight that I was really fucking excited about, and I've been talking about how good I think this guy is for his last few fights at least. Benoit Saint-Denis versus Dustin Poirier. Co-main event, 5-rounder. Man, Saint-Denis I think is one. It's like him, Manon Foyot. I think obviously you got Cyril Gane, but man, Saint-Denis is one of the best chances for France to get a hold of a title, I think. He is so well-rounded. He's got hard-ass kicks, good wrestling, good boxing. I mean, and he's really been making a name for himself lately. And to get a matchup against Dustin Poirier, that's a big deal. And man, kudos to Poirier for taking this fight. This is not an easy fight, right? This is obvious. And being 5 rounds, Poirier just coming off the loss that he had against Gaethje. Man, this is a tough fight for Poirier, and he probably could have taken a fight and waited for someone with a little more star power, but this is going to be a huge fucking spot for Saint-Denis. This is a big chance for him to prove himself against the division's elite, and if he could pick up a win over Poirier, we're going to be talking about like title eliminator fights next. This man is talented. I'm very excited to see this fight. I saw that Denis actually opened as a slight favorite, which people found interesting, but man, he's on a roll right now, and he's super talented, very well-rounded. I'm a big fan of Saint-Denis, if you can't tell. But yeah, like I said, me and a couple buddies of mine are going to go to this one, so I'm excited for it. In Miami, O'Malley versus Vera headlining, Gilbert Burns versus Jack Della Maddalena, Kevin Holland versus MVP, man, RDA versus Mateusz Gamrot, Song Yadong versus Petr Yan. I mean, damn, man, this fight card is fucking stacked. I'm super excited, and it makes me wonder what they're going to start rolling out for 300. Like, what do they got in their back pocket? Because there have been some fight announcements, but nothing that's making nothing that's jumping off the page too much. I mean, there's some good fights on there for sure. Like, we went over some of them, but I really thought that we'd get like, I don't know. I thought, when you're looking at how the card's getting set up, I initially thought Bilal versus Leon Edwards made the most sense because there'd be enough like supporting cast on there to support the 300 card. But if it doesn't continue to shape up, and unless you get a really big fight, I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen, man. Who are you going to throw on? Like, I don't know. I thought maybe Leon versus Islam would be a really good fight. But then Dana mentioned a comeback. Is he talking about... It doesn't seem like it's going to be Nate Diaz with him announcing the fucking boxing match with Jorge Masvidal and stuff. Like, I don't know. What are they going to do with 300? It just doesn't feel like it's shaping up to be as exciting of a card as me or a lot of people thought it would be, And like I said, I'm sure they got things in their back pocket, but I'd like to see what title fights they're going to end up throwing on this thing. But anyway, let's move on. Let's get on to this fight card today. Like I said, I've missed some things over the past few weeks for sure. But today, actually, we have the first UFC fight card, the first major card, I think, of the new year kicking off. And UFC Fight Night 234, Ankalaev versus Walker 2. This is a rematch, right? Obviously, their first fight ended when in a no contest after Ankalaev hit Johnny Walker while he was down, or kneed him while he was down, rather, and there was that whole debate about that doctor. That doctor had a rough night, but Johnny seemed to be there. He seemed like he was behind the eyes, but he answered some questions incorrectly, and they called the fight. So now we get to see this fight play out in a 5-round main event. So interesting fight. Should be a good one. Should be an exciting one. Johnny Walker's usually pretty, you can count on him doing some wild shit in there. And we lost a fight. The co-main event, I believe it was going to be the co-main. Unfortunately, Manel Kape versus Mateus Nicolau. I think that this fight was one of the more exciting fights on the card. So for, Kape to miss weight is kind of a bummer. But I was looking at his Instagram post, and he said he was suffering with some virus that him and his team kind of caught. And he's been pumping antibodies into him throughout the week trying to make weight. And honestly, if that is true, if that's what happened, kudos to him for still trying to fight that week or fight today. Right? Like, you just go through all that for a whole week. Your team's getting infected. You are taking antibodies. Those take a toll on you. You're trying to cut weight. It's a tough go, man, and it's understandable. And if he was really sick, commendable effort trying to get there. I know he missed by 3.5 pounds, but I don't think that weight throughout his career has been an issue for Manel Kopp. I think he's usually pretty reliable in that regard. I'm going to pull up his Wikipedia and see. No, never mind. He missed weight against Ode Osborne as well. So anytime that starts happening now that it's a second offense, now I start thinking like, fuck. I hate you don't ever want to put this on somebody, but you start thinking like, is it the virus? You've missed weight twice. Like, what was going on during that fight, And if you're Nicolau, you're looking at this and thinking he beat Ode Osborne after missing weight, right? They ended up fighting a catchweight bout at 129 pounds. It benefits to be the bigger person. And for Nicolau, he doesn't know, was he sick? Was their team sick? How sick was he? How severe was it? What's his, if I'm Nicolau and this guy's missing weight, 3.5 pounds in the 125-pound division is a lot. So from his perspective, he did the right thing on pulling out of the fight. I think there should be more of that. If you really want to punish a person who misses weight, call the fucking fight. You see so many fighters that the guy misses weight by sometimes an egregious amount, but even 2 or 3 pounds. You just know that they didn't go through what you did to get down to the weight. You knew it was difficult for them. And I think the best way to punish them is don't fucking fight them. I know it pisses Dana White off, but I don't know what else we're supposed to do in situations like that. So many times, like I said, you'll see somebody accept that fight, and then the bigger guy, the guy who didn't have to cut as much weight, ends up winning so often. So often that happens. So I think I will back Nicolau same way I backed I forget who Wonderboy was matched up against, but I'll back Nicolau in this every single time. Every single time there's a weight miss, you are accountable for getting to the scale as the fighter if you took the fight and stepping on weight. That's it. You know what I mean? So if I'm Nicolau, I 100% think he did the right thing, and I would encourage more fighters to do that. I know that you want to take the risk. You just went through this training camp, but the reality is that the guy has an advantage over you, and it's cheating. It's cheating, and a lot of the times, it doesn't play out in the guy who made weight's way, or in his favor rather. So I think Nicolau did the right thing. I will back that every single time. But the card gets shuffled around a little bit, and as a result now, they bumped up Andrei Arlovski versus Waldo Cortez Acosta. Acosta's coming off a big knockout, right? Made his debut on the Contender Series, and has accumulated a few fights in the UFC now, but he's going up against a veteran, man, in Andrei Arlovski. This is his 41st UFC fight. Is that not insane to you? That doesn't even make sense. Khabib only fought 29 fights in his entire career. Andrei Arlovski is fighting his 41st fight for the UFC. I don't know if that includes Zuffa. I just saw the stat on MMA Junkie. But either way, that is a ridiculous number of fights. And the thing about Arlovski is when he fights, man, he'll lose to he loses to some folks. But when you're watching him, you're like, damn, he looks like he's still there. Maybe he gets tagged a little bit here and there. He's suffered some knockouts and stuff and gone through some bumps, like I said. But when he's throwing his techniques, it's like, man, he's hanging with these guys. And when you get a guy like Cortez Acosta, right, who is newer to the UFC, doesn't have all that experience, sometimes being a veteran helps a lot in situations like that. And Arlovski has proven throughout his career that he's capable of pulling off wins like this, but if I'm being honest, man, I think Cortez Acosta just has the knockout power. And at some point with Arlovski, there has to be a major slide. There's just going to be. There's going to be a point where no matter how technical you are, it just won't keep up with the speed, agility, and power of these younger guys. And I think we're going to start seeing that, right? He's already riding 2 straight losses. First one being to Rogerio de Lima, then most recently to Dontel Mays. Right? Finished in both of those fights. I think this is where you start seeing a skid from Arlovski, and when the retirement talks start becoming a little bit more real. Because they've matched him up with a real contender, or not a contender, I'm sorry, but a real prospect, a guy with knockout power. He's 32 years old. He's a big guy, 6'4", right? And I just think that, man, this is a tough matchup for Arlovski. And like I said, 44 years old, there's a 12-year age gap. It just makes me think that the odds are stacked against him. And this will be the one where I think folks start going, okay, where's your path forward from here? And I don't think Arlovski will retire, but I think that we're going to see him get beat up a little bit tonight, unfortunately. I think it'll just be hard for him to keep up with things, and I think we're going to see like Cortez Acosta land that big shot at some point. So we'll see. We'll see, man. Interesting fight. But next one, Bruno Ferreira versus Phil Hawes. Now, Phil Hawes is really fucking good. Like, when you watch him fight, he can wrestle, he has good striking, but man, he can just never put it all together. And he's suffered some bad knockout losses now to Roman Dolidze, right? And then who was the other guy that knocked him out? 1 sec, I'm pulling it up. Ikram Alaskarov most recently, that's right. So Phil Hawes, when you watch him fight, you're like, damn, super skilled, but he leaves too many openings, man. And one of the things that makes me nervous with him fighting a guy like Bruno Ferreira is Bruno moves a lot, right? Which could be to his detriment because Phil Hawes is willing to walk you forward, right? And with Bruno moving a lot, if he's not able to time that big shot, Hawes could start wearing on him. I think a wrestling-based approach would be really smart from Hawes in this fight, right? Because Ferreira is one of those guys who he kind of bounces around, like he moves a lot, like I said, and he finds an opportunity to land bombs. And we've seen Hawes get exposed and knocked out cold in his 2 most previous fights, right? So it makes me a little bit nervous getting into a kickboxing match with a guy like Ferreira. But if Hawes is able to back him up, get him up against the cage, cut off some of that movement, and engage in a wrestling-heavy fight, Hawes is a big, strong guy, and he's a very talented wrestler. But I think he has to focus a lot on control, right, and staying safe. If he does that, I think that Ferreira moves around a lot, and I think it's going to start to wear him out in the 2nd and 3rd round. Because you got to think, I mean, Ferreira finishes most of his fights in the 1st round. The guy's 10-1. He knocked out Gregory Rodriguez, right? And yeah, 7 knockout wins, 3 submissions. And so many of his fights, he's never had a fight go into the 3rd round, right? He's only had 2 fights go to the 2nd round, looking at his record right now, right? Even his loss to Ruzabov, I'm going to fuck his name up if I pronounce it. Nursultan Ruzabov, most recently, he got knocked out, but in the 1st round. He knocked out Gregory Rodriguez in the 1st round. Leon Aliyu in the Dana White Contender Series in the 1st round. So it's like, man, what happens if Hawes is able to stay safe, keep walking him down, keep his hands up, keep guarding that chin, don't overcommit on anything, and just let this guy wear himself out looking for these big shots? And I'm telling you, man, he bounces around a lot. And bouncing around a lot the way he does in and out, I don't think it's a smart game plan at 185. I think that throughout Bruno Ferreira's career, that's going to have to slow down as he starts fighting more and more elite competition. But this is a very winnable fight for Phil Hawes if he sticks to a game plan where he's consistent, safe, and engages in a fight that will wear on the style of Bruno Ferreira. I like Phil Hawes in this fight. Like I said, I think we've seen some really bad knockouts from him lately. He's lost 2 in a row. And this guy that he's fighting, Bruno Ferreira. All right, sorry guys, my thing stopped recording because I ran out of space on my Mac, so I had to put everything on a hard drive, blah, blah, blah. But we're back talking about Phil Hawes versus Bruno Ferreira. Anyway, I think I got through most of it, but yeah, I like Phil Hawes' chances in this fight. If he can just keep walking Bruno Ferreira down, putting the pressure on him and staying safe and getting into these grappling exchanges and wearing on that style of Ferreira, because bouncing around a lot at 185, man, it's going to take a toll. So if Phil Hawes can survive that 1st round, I really like his chances moving into rounds 2 and 3. So I got Phil Hawes in this one, man. I got some confidence in him. I think he can pull this one off. All right, Mario Bautista versus Ricky Simón is the next fight. Bantamweight bout, really excited for this. This is an exciting one stylistically, right? Because Bautista is a guy who's long and rangy, and Simón is more like compact, right? But one of the things that I really am excited for in this, aside from the striking aspect, because you get a guy, again, in Simón, who, like I said, is kind of compact, short and powerful, has good boxing, works the body really well. And Bautista's long, lengthy, right? Can hit you from far away. So I'm really interested to see the puzzle on the feet. But the thing I'm most excited for in this is how do the grappling exchanges play out? Because Ricky Simón is definitely the better wrestler. Right? When he gets his hands locked together, you're going for a ride too. Like, he lifts guys up and slams them down on the mat. But Mario Bautista has some fucking slick jiu-jitsu. Ricky Simón has good jiu-jitsu as well, but I think that Bautista is going to be able to cause some problems for Simone from the bottom with his guard, right? Because he's so active and those legs are so long. And Bautista does what you have to do well from the bottom if you want to be successful. He wrestles with his legs, right? So I think that we're going to see some really interesting grappling exchanges in this one. But overall, man, excuse me, Ricky Simone is a black belt as well, I believe. But I just like his wrestling and control from the top. And we've seen Bautista struggle with the wrestling aspect a little bit in the past. Like, he gets taken down sometimes. And when he does, like I said, he does use his guard to be able to get back to his feet or create submission opportunities or sweep and come up on top. We've seen this example plenty of times. But I think that Simone is going to be a little bit too savvy for those things. I think that early on, when Simone gets Bautista to the ground, we could see some situations where he maybe puts him in a little bit of danger, but ultimately we'll see Simone deal with it, move on. And once like one or two submission attempts fail from the bottom, it generally starts to tire on the bottom person and they lose confidence a little bit. So I think that what we see is, who knows? These guys are both like I said, I just think Simone has a really good a really big wrestling advantage. And I like his chances to get Bautista to the ground. And when he gets in there, I think he'll be able to control him. And I think he'll be savvy enough to stay away from the submission attempts, right? This could be a fight, though, where both of these guys respect each other's ground game and we end up seeing more of a kickboxing matchup. And if so, obviously the key for Simone is going to be to get to the inside. But I just think this fight favors Simone, man. The more I think about it, when you're fighting tall guys in the UFC especially, or MMA in general, you have a cage, right? So you can cut off the space advantage that they have by pressuring them back against the cage. I think that Simone packs a lot of power. He's going to be a force on the feet in his own right, despite the length and everything from Bautista. And I to be honest, man, I like Simone's chances to bully Mario Bautista around in there a little bit. I think the key for Bautista to win this fight is going to be a lot of movement, right? And maybe not going for so many submissions. Maybe keeping the fight on the feet is a wise move for Bautista in this fight, right? If he can continue to circle, keep his back off the cage, and dot Ricky Simone up from a distance, that might be an easier pathway to victory for him. Because like I said, Ricky's a great wrestler. He's going to be the one more likely to end up on top. And it's going to be important, in my opinion, for Bautista to use his submission attempts as a way to get back up to the feet. Like, accepting that they might not all land, but if you start stringing together 1, 2, 3 submission attempts, that's when you start getting stuck on your back and wasting a lot of time off the clock and tiring yourself out. It's got to be like one submission attempt leads to an opportunity for you to get to your feet, and now we're back up. Then you discourage the wrestler a little bit, right? There's these little games that you have to play in the middle of the fight that are going to be the difference maker. So I think it just depends on who game plans better, right? If we see Bautista circling a lot, I think he has a good chance to kind of dot Ricky Simone up from range. But if he lets himself start getting backed up a little bit, and Ricky will also do a great job at cutting the octagon off. That's why I think I'm leaning excuse me. I think that's why I'm leaning a little bit more towards Ricky as well, because he does cut the cage off well, and I think that he'll be able to stay out in front of Bautista. And mixing in the level change attempts, like I said, Ricky has power of his own that you have to be aware of. Good boxing. He works the body well. I don't know. But we've seen Ricky struggle when he has to stand in the center of the cage, right? When he's not the one pressing the action forward, you can capitalize on things against him. He does have gaps. So really interesting fight. This is one of the fights, other than Manel Kape versus Nicolau, which unfortunately is scrapped, that I'm most excited for on the entire card. Next, another guy with a ton of UFC experience, Jim Miller versus Gabriel Benitez. Now, this is one where the odds are really close, right? And for good reason, but I have no idea what to make of this fight, man. Jim Miller's won 4 of his last 5, but it includes guys like Cowboy Cerrone, right? Nicholas Mata, Eric Gonzalez, Jesse Butler, guys who you can't even click on their link in Wikipedia, right? Like, it's hard to put a lot of stock into those 4 wins because a Cowboy, obviously, at the tail end of his career is the most notable one. But, man, I still, as a whole, if I was going to bet on the fight, I just favor the young guy. And Benitez is only 35. Benitez has a lot of mileage on him too, but just not the same amount that Jim Miller does. Benitez has a pretty good chin. He can take a beating, right? And we've seen him end up on the wrong side of grappling exchanges, such as his fight against Billy Quarantillo, continuously gave up his back and stuff, right? But Benitez can box. He can take a shot. He knows how to roll with punches a little bit. He's comfortable fighting in the pocket, and he has power of his own, man. Like, he's hurt some really good guys that he's fought, right? I'm pretty sure he hurt Onama in that fight, maybe early on. I don't know. But he can surprise you, man, and he's comfortable to sit in that pocket. Honestly, I'm just taking the younger guy. And one of the things, though, that Jim Miller probably will have an advantage with is the pure wrestling. But I've seen enough from Benitez. The man, his jiu-jitsu is not bad at all. And he does use it as a way to get back up to his feet. And Quarantillo is a guy who's really good on the ground, and we saw him get out of some bad situations in that fight before eventually getting, I can't remember if he got ground and pounded or submitted. Let me check. Yeah, TKO. Eventually got just beat up on the ground there. But I don't know, man. I think that the length and everything of Benitez is going to be a factor in this fight. I kind of like Gabriel Benitez in this one. But our main event, Magomed Ankalaev versus Johnny Walker. This is actually a rematch, right? Like we talked about in the beginning of the show. Ankalaev landed an illegal knee while Johnny Walker was down at the last pay-per-view event. There's some confusion between Johnny Walker and the doctor. Johnny seems to be completely there, but the doctor calls the fight. So now we get a 5-round main event, and both of these guys have 5-round experience, right? Ankalaev obviously fighting Jan Blachowicz to a draw in the title fight, and Johnny Walker going up against Thiago Santos. He's had some other main events, but they've fallen short of 5 rounds. But he's gone 5 rounds before, and so is Ankalaev. Right now, the thing that obviously Johnny Walker, in terms of just his ability to surprise you, explosiveness, he holds the advantage in this fight in that department, right? But I think that Ankalaev is so well-rounded and just so much more safe and technical that in a 5-round fight, that style is really going to favor him, right? I think you've seen Johnny Walker take a bit of a more cautious approach lately. He is a little bit more patient with his attacks, but over the course of 5 rounds against a guy like Ankalaev who likes to put the pressure on you, walk you down, box you, he has really good wrestling. I think he's going to have a grappling advantage in this fight over Johnny Walker, especially when you're the big guy. It really helps to be the guy initiating the offense and being the one going for the takedown. And I think we're more likely to see that out of Ankalaev, right? I think his hands are just a little bit sharper. I think Johnny leaves a lot of openings. And when Johnny he is forced to fight a patient fight where he's picking his strikes and stuff like that, he's an excellent kicker. Really good knees. Like I said, he's explosive. And we have seen Ankalaev struggle to defend leg kicks. But in their most recent fight, I noticed that Johnny kept attacking that lead leg. Boom, kicking it, finding success with it. But Ankalaev eventually found a counter for it, right? And landed a shot on Johnny that kind of kept Johnny from continuing to do that. So I just think that in terms of technical ability, the advantage lies strongly with Ankalaev. I think he's going to be able to wrestle Johnny down to the ground, maintain position there, and just his style is a little bit safer. That being said, I think Walker's got to try to finish this fight if he wants to win. I think it's going to be, like I said, when Walker starts fighting patient, he's going to be forced to box, and man, his hands just aren't as smooth, right? He overextends a lot on a shot. He does have a lot of power on his shots. He does have a lot of power, but I think Ankalaev will just stay shelled up, hands to his face, and find his way in. And I just think that it's a tough fight for Johnny Walker, and his best way to end it is to try to find a gap and find some sort of defensive opening and end it early, like within a couple rounds, like 2 or 3 rounds. Because like I said, fighting a patient 5-round fight, I just think that stylistically it's really going to benefit Ankalaev, and I like him in this fight. I think Ankalaev's going to end up getting the finish, though, ultimately. I think he'll just beat up on Johnny over the course of the fight, wear on him continuously until he's able to either submit him or probably get him out of there with ground and pound, right? I just think he's going to beat Johnny up and just consistently put the pressure on him. And I think we'll see, no offense to Johnny Walker, but a clear difference in an elite title contender and a guy who's right on the cusp of being in that elite range, right? Like Johnny Walker, I think, is a step below that, and I think we're going to see that played out in this fight tonight. So anyway, let's wrap this one up, guys. Like I said, it feels good to just kind of get back into this and start recording again, knock some of the rust off, and I'm trying to be much more productive with this year. I'm going to be trying to – obviously, it's fucking Saturday. It's the day of the fights today. Like I said, though, I just got home Wednesday night. We had all kinds of weird shit happen. Our, furnace went out, right? Our cats were here alone. We had to take them to the cat sitter. All this chaos and stuff over the last few days right when we got home. So a little late in getting this one out, but I'm really going to try to get this podcast out every Wednesday before the fights and then every Sunday immediately after the fights, doing a recap of it. But yeah, anyway, guys, hope you enjoyed. If you did, do me a favor, hit the subscribe button, give it a thumbs up, leave a comment, all that fucking good shit. And yeah, appreciate you. Have a great day. NFL playoffs today. Enjoy football.